Hello Summoners and welcome back to another ProGuides video. My name is Nathan and today we'll be analyzing CoreJJ solo queue gameplay. CoreJJ is currently rank 1 on the NA solo queue ladder and is no doubt the best support if not the best player in the region. I mean, he has the world's title under his belt for a reason. He truly shows that any role can carry, and we're going to show you exactly how he does it. Before we dive right on in, I want to mention that learning from VODs like this is a great resource, but it can only help so much. If you're really trying to be serious about climbing in solo queue, you should head over to ProGuides.com. Our top tier coaches are available around the clock and are always ready to help you learn everything that you need to dominate the ladder. We're even offering courses from the insanely talented pros like Aframu, Xmithy, and the focus of this video, CoreJJ. These courses can seriously elevate your game, so don't miss out. Now let's take a look at what it takes to make it to rank 1. Let's start things off with a little bit of a pregame analysis. When it comes to support, Thresh is by far the best playmaking champion in this role. His kit is incredibly versatile, giving him the ability to play for picks, knock people out of dashes and jumps, and peel with his disruptive abilities. And his Lantern is one of the most broken abilities in the game, with the ability to ferry teammates away from otherwise certain death. You can always go full aggro, play more passive, or find something in between. Because of all of that, he has a massive skill cap, and no matter what the meta is, a truly good Thresh can always find ways to carry the game. You just have to find a role in each game based on both team comps. So let's go ahead and do just that. Let's take a look at the specific game and see if we can identify CoreJJ's goals for the laning phase and team fights. The bot lane 2v2 matchup is Kate and Thresh versus Senna and Tristana. In general, this should be a fairly easy to win lane. Caitlyn outranges both of the enemy laners and can easily poke them down. Normally, Tristana response to a poke lane is to jump in, but Thresh's Flay helps prevent that from ever happening. Even if Triss does find a window to jump in, she basically needs to damage to get a kill on her own. This is because Senna isn't exactly built for going for all-ins in lanes like that. If they swap their sides to trading on Thresh instead, they're likely to be in danger of being flayed or hooked in, especially if he has his flash up. So TLDR, Thresh Kate has a lot more pressure in this lane. Now with all of this pressure, he and Kate should be able to either constantly poke and chip away at the tower, or CoreJJ should be able to find good roam opportunities. So let's take a look at what should happen in theory once the game gets out of the laning phase. Remember, you have to measure both team comps to come up with a good game plan. For example, if your team has good team fight, it may be the best to play the split push game if the enemy team has no possible answer for somebody like Fiora in the side lane. Looking at CoreJJ's team, Urgot is an incredibly strong side laner, and no champion on the other team can fight him one-on-one once he reaches the 2 or 3 item mark. Thresh is pretty good at facilitating 1-3-1s and can roam to help the side laners, or just sit back behind his ADC in the mid lane, always ready to lantern them back to safety. He and NA are also both good at making picks, which works in a strategy where your team is playing to pull the enemy team apart. Lastly, when measuring the enemy's comp, every champion but Gwen has a strong preference for 5v5 fights. All of this is to say that CoreJJ's team should always want to play more of a split style game, assuming that the early game goes smoothly. Before we go into the actual VOD review, let's quickly talk about his build. For his runes, he takes Aftershock, Demolish, Bone Plating, Unflinching, Biscuit Delivery, and Time Warp Tonic. His stat runes are gonna be Attack Speed, Adaptive, and Armor. Personally, I'd rather go second wind versus a double range bot lane, but perhaps he just wants to be as tanky as possible when he goes for the all-in. I also like Font of Life a lot more on Thresh, but his idea of this lane is to really play for plays with Caitlyn during laning phase, which is definitely a fair point. And honestly, he's probably right in him being rank 1. For his items, he starts Steel Shoulder Guards and rushes Boost Mobility ASAP for map presence. Then he builds into Shirelia's as his mythic, and goes for Mikhail's Crucible after that. His next item is a Ward Stone, and the game ends before he can fill the last slot. Some other likely choices would have been Zeke's, Frozen Heart, or Redemption. Alright, with all of that out of the way, let's get into the game itself, shall we? Positioning is a huge deal in the bot lane. If you're standing in the wrong place, your lane partners can be left to 1v2 the enemy bot lane. Move too far forward and you'll probably take too much poke. It's like bot lane is a constant dance, and you have to move according to what all 3 players are trying to do. And we see an example of that literally the second the laning phase begins. CoreJJ is walking on the left side with Kate. This is very matchup specific. If Senna is in the bush and he face checks her, she would land an auto and a Q, cashing in the stacks of her support item and netting a free soul, while CoreJJ wouldn't be able to punish her much for it. As soon as she walks into lane, he moves to take bush control. Bush control is one of the most important skills for laning that a support needs to have. Just ask any ADC. If the enemy support is freely able to weave in and out of bushes, you feel an immense amount of pressure. You don't really want to take poke or risk being engaged on, so more often than not, you're forced to play further back. Now we get an example of that here. Watch CoreJJ leverage the bush control to take trades on the enemy bot lane. Caitlyn mistakenly overchases just to hit Tristana over hitting Senna, who is right in front of her, but even with that misplay, they win the health trade. Having the enemy bot lane chunked out this early means that there's definitely level 2 all-in potential. On that note, notice how he's constantly either moving up to auto and threaten a flay to force the enemy to back off, or autoing minions to make sure that he and Kate get level 2 first. Every move he makes is pressuring the enemy bot lane. If you're not being this proactive, then you're probably doing it wrong. Once they do hit level 2, he immediately pulls the trigger with the flash flay hook combo. In terms of execution, it's played pretty badly, with Kate missing a trap leading to a 1-for-1 instead of a free kill. But for his half of the play, CoreJJ played it pretty much perfectly. Anyway, after that 2v2, note that he doesn't just immediately go for a reset. Tristana as a champion can't freeze waves when she has her E leveled. Knowing that she can't hold the wave, her best bet is to hard shove it in so she can go for a reset. CoreJJ is aware that the enemy jungler shouldn't be down here right now, so he plays the pressure Tristana so she can't freely push the wave out. Slowing down her shove means that Caitlyn should, in theory, be able to freeze the wave close to her tower. Like with most things in these videos, this is just another subtle skill that really makes a difference once you pick it up. Since Tristana was never able to get the wave shoved all the way out, CoreJJ and his ADC are easily able to make the first move for a scuttle fight. While it isn't always the case that you should be able to ditch your wave just to leave to help your jungler, you need to do so when you are able to. Having first move usually means winning the fight, and with how snowbally League of Legends is in general at the moment, winning early fights very often means winning the whole game. After securing the crab, they make their way back to the bot lane for the crashing wave. CoreJJ makes the mistake of taking too much damage and then proccing his aftershock, so he dies for it. Had he procced it a bit earlier, he may have had the HP to survive. Honestly, it was just a risky, unnecessary play to go for, especially with no ignite. After coming back to life, a lot of supports would look for a roam, especially when you consider that it's Thresh with an Annie mid. But look at the state of the mid's wave. It's pushing in towards Galio. He could shove the wave in hard, but realistically, he shouldn't, and you don't want to waste time banking on your opponent making a mistake. It's much better to get to lane and help Caitlyn shove in the wave so she can take her reset. Then, with her out of the lane, he can make use of the roam timer. He moves up to support mid, placing a control ward and positioning behind Annie. Here's a bit of a mental stimulation for you. Why does he stand behind Annie rather than sitting in the bush to gank Galio? If he felt the need to force a gank, he would position quite a bit closer, but he's flashless. If Gwen chases him out of there, then he's guaranteed to be dead. Also, Annie is pretty low on both health and mana, and they'd very likely lose the 2v2 if it came down to that. So instead, he goes with the better option of sitting behind Annie, planning to either punish Galio for charging in aggressively 1v1 or to throw out a lantern if Gwen ganks. After babysitting Annie for a few seconds, he returns to the bot lane to cheese the bush. He plays his fight perfectly, landing his hook on Tristana and flaying her into the trap. The only reason they have to trade a death for the kill is because Kate misses her Q. Some players, those ADC mains in denial, would blame their support for flaying Tristana out of the Kate Q, but here, he had to flay her into the trap before the chain wore off. He goes on to kill Senna afterwards, and just wants to leave the minions in the spot, since it would be a huge stacked wave for Caitlyn, but Gwen is here to fix the lane for the enemy bot lane. After he's left alone bot lane, he decides it's time to make some play on the map with his newly acquired Moby boots. He roams all the way over the top river to help his Olaf. This could be a great move, but with Olaf having no ultimate and Viego having massive priority, it doesn't turn out so well. After that, he chases Gwen with Annie to force her back to her side of the map. He then resets, and with Caitlyn dead, there's no reason to go back to the bot lane. He runs straight back to the mid lane and then up to the Rift Herald to ensure that Annie gets the kill on Gwen. He then finishes his cross-map journey in the top lane where he blows Viego's flash. Take a second to think back on what he's done after leaving the bot lane over 2 minutes ago. He went to mid, chased Gwen up to top, reset, went back to mid, then to Rift, then to top. Even with all of that only resulting in a total of 1 kill, 1 death, and a flash blown top, that's a lot of map pressure that he's giving for his team. After resetting, he decides to go back to bot lane. Why do you think he decides to stop roaming at this point? Well, there are 2 reasons. For one, the tower is low and he just wants to make sure that they can't just freely get all 5 plates and tower first blood. 2. Even if he did want to roam, Annie is in no condition to fight. She's low on HP and she has no ultimate, so even if Olaf was there, there's a good chance that they lost a 2v3. So the takeaway is that you need to identify what a good roam is. If you're just roaming just for the sake of roaming without actually thinking about what plays are possible, you're just leaving your ADC out to dry, as you accomplish nothing elsewhere. On top of that, you're running the risk of you getting caught out by the enemy jungler and being a free kill. Back to examining some basic laning phase techniques, notice that as soon as Caitlyn shoves the wave in, he runs to the river and hides in the brush. This makes the enemy team think that he could just be going for roam, which has 2 consequences. 1. The enemy mid laner is forced to play more respectfully. 2. This could possibly make the enemy bot lane force on his ADC. Trist isn't even here for the latter option, but it's just generally a good tactic to have in your playbook. Anyway, after seeing all 3 of the enemy champions near top lane, he goes back to lane to pressure Senna under her tower. She disrespects and ends up dying for it. This kill actually sets up for a potential dive on Tristana, but Olaf, yeah, just watch for yourself. With their tower falling, laning phase is officially over, at least for the bottom lane. Let's go over the state of the game at this point. The score is 9-14, and with the enemy getting those plates and tower first blood, the gold gap is about 4k. Mid and jungle are pretty behind their counterparts. Top is barely behind, but will easily beat Viego in 1v1s, especially later on into the game. Caitlyn is down about 1,000 gold. All 4 carries are down gold on their counterparts with no discernible advantages. CoreJJ knows that he's gonna have to force plays to get back into the game. At this point, it's definitely more okay to look for those high-risk, high-reward options. Knowing his team has to win every play that they can, he's quick to move upwards to a fight near top lane. He knows he's not likely needed there, but he just wants to be in the area just in case. This is how you should be moving on the map if you play support. Don't just autopilot to wherever your ADC is. Look at how he pops Scryer's Bloom, and then he just hangs back as Olaf is clearing a ward. Since he doesn't actually show himself on the minimap, there's a good chance that they aren't all aware that he's there. Being stealthy is important when it comes to making plays on the map. This point is definitely on the more trivial side of things, but hey, everything counts when you're trying to climb. The first step of getting back into the game when your team is behind early is to open up the map. If you can't do that, you're just never going to be able to make things happen. Knowing this, CoreJJ hovers around Rift as Olaf does it. As Rift is about to die, he moves towards Gwen, who just killed Urgot top lane. His team should be moving with him, but Annie is just wandering around, NA style, and dies. Still, he's able to lantern in Olaf for the free kill on Gwen. This point shows off how CoreJJ isn't actually just a reactionary player or somebody who just mindlessly runs around the map. He's very proactive, and he's always looking for ways to make the next play. After that last bit of action, he stays in the area and looks for a gank on the Galio. At this point, he's ganking so much, then he may as well just be a second jungler. No one makes it in time to do anything with his gank, but still, his intentions are good here. And he's not giving up yet. Olaf walks to the top with him, ready to drop Rift on the tower, so Core ends up waiting for him. The two go on a kill for Galio, but he misses his hook and Galio survives. CoreJJ is actually just sort of baited into overstaying because Olaf really wants to drop the Rift Herald right now. This costs them both their lives, though Urgot gets a shutdown on Tristana as a result, and then another on Galio shortly after that. But as I like to say, that just because it works out doesn't mean it was the right play. But that's just NA Challenger for you. With top tower knocked down in that last messy play, CoreJJ now moves towards mid lane to support Caitlyn. Remember, his team needs to open up the map to get stuff done, and the mid tower is the last outer left. As Kate pushes, he clears vision right below her, and establishes vision for his team in the enemy blue jungle. He then helps out Olaf take blue, but then goes for an overly aggressive pick on Galio that costs his life. But like I mentioned before, because you're behind, high risk, high reward plays are necessary. After respawning, he then goes to support Caitlyn as she pushes mid. While he may have spent the majority of the early game roaming and leaving her to fend off for herself, it's reaching the point of the game where she's actually now the primary carry. That means babysitting her is just the most important job right now. Caitlyn needs to be able to farm so she can carry fights, and if CoreJJ is hovering near her, she can chip away at her tower and be lanterned to safety. In case you haven't been paying attention, CoreJJ has a habit of immediately dipping out of lane after an ally pushes a wave. This helps apply pressure in some scenarios, but more importantly, it's just a good habit to constantly clear out the enemy wards and put some of your own down. You should pretty much be using Sweeper on cooldown. In this little clip, look at how CoreJJ tries to constantly play around the enemy's vision. This is yet another small but important skill that anybody could learn. Stealthy plays equals more successful plays. He ends up revealing himself as he attempts to help Caitlyn escape from the enemy team jumping on her, but still, it's a thought that counts. This is where things start to go a little bit downhill. After a very sloppy extended team fight, CoreJJ's team loses 4-1, and the enemy team takes 2 towers. Thankfully, Gwen overstays hard, giving a pick that should buy some breathing room for CoreJJ's team. But instead of using that dead time to establish vision and maybe go for another pick, they hired Force Baron, which goes about as badly as you'd expect. The team is aced, and the enemy team picks it up. Now the game isn't completely over yet, but it's definitely a lot harder than it needed to be. To win, CoreJJ will need to make some desperate plays, and even then he needs the enemy team to throw a bone. At this point, the best thing this team can do is play for Dragon Soul. CoreJJ heads to Dragon to set up as soon as it spawns, since he knows the enemy team will be gunning for it as well. This leads to him making a crucial catch on Senna. He then plays the ensuing fight perfectly, juggling in and out to help his team get an ace. This is the big break in the game that the team needed. Senna, Tristana, and Viego all had shutdowns, and while this team is still down 8k gold, a lot of the gold from that fight went onto Caitlyn. Remember, she's a primary carry in these team fights, so that's a really big deal. CoreJJ's team is now also on Soul Point, which should give a lot of leverage in later macro decisions. After taking Dragon, notice that CoreJJ doesn't immediately go back to base. He goes into the enemy jungle to place a deep ward and even brings Caitlyn along to counter jungle. We often talk about how important counter jungling is for split pushers and junglers, but even when you're support, you should be encouraging your teammates to clear the camps. Counter jungling is vital for closing the gold gap when behind and extending it when ahead. It's now time to go back and spend their newly acquired money, but Senna face checks to give one last sack of gold. After things start to stabilize, the team takes a really dumb fight in the top river or blue buff area. As I've mentioned before, Caitlyn is a primary carry in team fights, and she's not anywhere near close enough to win this one for her team. This fight gives a lot of momentum back to the enemy team, and even leads to an inhib falling. But the throws aren't done yet. The enemy team is ready to toss it right back. Senna dies to Caitlyn bot lane as Gwen and Galio get cocky in CoreJJ's base and give over their lives for free. This gives CoreJJ time to establish vision control. After swooping the river and his own jungle, he sees Senna and Tristana farming mid. He knows the enemy team doesn't have vision in the area, so there's a chance that they walk over in an attempt to place some wards. Waiting patiently for a pick like this is a tactic that very often will result in picks that can go ahead and lead to Baron, inhibs, or even a game-winning push. In this case, no such luck, but still, it's always worth going for. Over the next 2 minutes, there's a pretty big lull in action, but CoreJJ never stops playing the vision game. He uses sweeper every time that it's up. He's constantly placing down wards, and then he's resetting to make sure that he has full charges for when it's needed. As his team clears the wave, look at how he sits back out of vision range. This is to be ready to Lantern Kate back to safety. He can do this because of the enemy comp. Even with his flash up, the enemy team has to run at Caitlyn in a telegraphed way, and Lantern is enough to save her. Again, somebody like Zac or Lee Sin, he may position up more with Caitlyn, since he would need to flay them out of their engage, and his Lantern would be useless in that scenario. This is the most decisive point in the entire game. With Soul Point on their side, CoreJJ's team has a huge advantage despite being down 8k gold. They set up near Dragon. Urgot was going to back to match Galio top lane, but he realizes that he needs to stay with the team, so he cancels his recall. That is a very good decision. TP's channel may only take a few seconds, but that's more than enough to make or break a fight. Anyway, look at how the enemy team's positioning. Galio was just top, Tristana is mid, and Viego, Senna, and Gwen are both below Dragon. This is the prime time to look for a pick. Unfortunately for the blue squad, Senna correctly checks the bush with her W, but it was still a good attempt to go for. With no fight happening yet, Tristana threatens to end the game by pushing down mid. Instead of panicking and playing into the other team's hands, CoreJJ and company make the right decision to go for Dragon. Annie even stuns Gwen. Everything is perfect, and this should be a free soul, but Olaf misses Smite, and Galio steals it. Following that, a crazy fiesta happens back in base. Urgot TPs to save the game, and the rest of the team shows up to clean up the fight. With these 3 kills, they're able to move towards Baron. With Gwen showing up in the blue jungle, CoreJJ moves to make sure that she doesn't attempt a Baron steal. He then takes it another step further. He wants to make sure that she's not recalling somewhere in the jungle. He finds her and baits her into the death. Why did he care so much? Why didn't he just settle for the Baron? At this point, it's not just the gold that's valuable, it's the death timer. Gwen being dead means that CoreJJ and his team have almost a minute to push out waves, spend gold, and establish vision to start pushing out the map with the Baron buff. Note that when his team is pushing and hitting the tower, he's still clearing wards, establishing side vision and waiting in bushes. This helps him to prevent enemy flanks, which is the only way for his team to lose a fight. Again, he's just bringing up the rear, serving as a human ward and a barrier against a flank. Viego very badly wants to dive into this backline and give Galio a good ult spot, but CoreJJ sits back, preventing any chance of that happening. He then goes on to play this final fight perfectly, lanterning Kate back to safety while constantly disrupting the enemy champion's movements. And that about wraps it up for our analysis of CoreJJ's solo queue gameplay. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, be sure to sub so you never miss out on any of our other content. If you have another high elo player that you'd like us to look at, let us know down in the comments below. And one last thing, don't forget to check out our Discord in the description box below, where you can discuss League further, or just hang out and be a part of the community. I can't wait to see you guys back in the next video, but until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and have a wonderful day. Peace.